Alright, in this video I'll be going through the last factorial digit problem, and the way I'll start off is the problem statement. Problem statement being, find the last digit of a factorial of a given non-negative number n. So what does that mean? It means that we're going to go ahead and start with I'll go ahead and give an example. This part right here. So our example is we are given number 4. So the factorial is basically you multiply a number in a descending order. So you would go from 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 in total, leading us to number 24. Now, because we are trying to get the last digit, this means that 24 isn't exactly our answer, but 4, because it's the last number. And that's pretty much what we're going to be doing in this. So, for one, starting in the understanding portion is I am taking an input of int, output, and int. So right off the bat, because I am going to be working with, the way we're going to have to do this is pretty much the factorial formula. And how that is we basically have a number minus a number minus 1, meaning that 4 is going to be multiplied by, it would be like this, it would be 4 times 3, that would equal 12. And then we multiply again. 2. And that would also equal our 24. And because we're just down to 1, it would still equal 24, so nothing really changes once you hit the last part. So just to kind of show the example of how that n minus 1, so visually that's what I'm familiar with. Another thing is I have a exceeding column. I want to say is what it's called. Oh, no, number column problem, that's what it's called, which is pretty much that, A is going to equal 1, for example. 1, B is equal to 2, and then when we get to A, that's pretty much saying that we have 26 plus 1, so I equal 27. So we're pretty much just going up by 1. So those are the two matching problems that I see. I understand the first one isn't exactly a coding problem, but that's more the formula we're working with, and that's what I'm familiar with in a math setting that I've worked with. So, to get to it, let's go through the planning stage of it. So right off the bat, I would have to do is take an input of a num, would be my first thing. I then, because I am going to be working with that n, I basically need a second n, because if I don't have an n different, then what's going to happen is that eventually I'm going to hit 0, and the whole thing is going to break and hit 0. So I need to basically have two separate n's. They are going to start at the same number, but one is going to be the result of 1, while the other is going to be a decrement of a loop that we're going to go through. And so, of course, we're going to make our answer. It's going to equal to num. Alright, good to know. Alright, so our answer is equal to num, and then our next part that we're going to do is we're going to go through an if else statement, checking if it's 0. The thing about factorial is that when it comes to 0, 0 factorial is going to equal 1. It took me a while to understand it, but it's essentially saying that, it kind of goes out where when we're defining factorial is all positive integers from 1 to 0, which means it's an empty product, is what I've been explaining. It, from there, I don't really exactly know how to explain it more beyond just factorial of 0 is always going to equal 1. And then everything else, 2 times 1 is 2, 3 times 2 is 6, so it kind of ends from there. So to start off, we'll go ahead and check if num is equal to 0. And if that's true, we want to go ahead and print 1. And that would get out the way. Just double checking in my plans. Yeah, it should equal to 1. Now, next thing is that after we do that, is we would then have an else statement that pretty much checks everything else. And within this else statement, we're going to have a while loop. So this is where that second end comes in handy. So in our if statement, we're pretty much going to check, we're going to keep this loop going while num is going to be greater than 1. So that means is we're going to go ahead and have our n minus 1 formula. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start with our answer. So I'm just going to call it ans. It's going to equal ans. And we're going to multiply that just because the coding terms, it won't work like that. So I'm going to multiply that by num minus 1. So the start off is, I'll put the number under it for an example. It would then be 4 times 3 because we're subtracting 1. And then our answer is going to equal 12. And then what's going to happen is the next part under it, $12 is going to equal 2. And that is going to go ahead and hit over to 24. And we don't need to hit over there to 24 times 1 because it's going to equal the same. So that's how that goes. So that's pretty much the whole cycle we're going through. So this, and then we would have to the increment by 1. Minus equal 1. And at the end of that while loop, we're going to have to access the last element, it needs to be a string. So we need to have ans equal to string. And that's how that's going to go out. Is we need to have it be a string so we can access the last element. So then we would go and just print out our ans. And what I need is it to be a negative 1, because when you have a negative inside of that, it's going to be the last element in our number, because once a string, it works out. So that's pretty much how this coding will work out. And going through the understanding and explanation of it, the planning is that we would take in our let's go ahead and actually get the implementation part out the way. So again, starting with our plan, I'm going to be referring up here. We're taking input of a number, so num is going to equal int. But our next thing we would have is ans is going to equal num and from there that's when we have our if statement. If num is equal to 0, we then want to print out 1. Everything else that's when we're going to start going through our while loop. So num is greater than 1. We're going to have answer equal our answer num minus 1, so we're n times n minus n. Then we're going to decrement num minus equal 1. And at the end of that, actually that needs to be inside the while loop. And then what's going to happen is we're going to have to turn our integer ants into a string. And then we're going to go ahead and print out our last digit. -1. And that's pretty much how this last factorial digit is going to work out. Looking at it through the different stages, I think the main part that we're looking at is going to be our planning and our implementation. So just to recap, in the planning portion, we take an input, and then we jump down to taking an input, declare answer equal to number, our answer is equal to number, and then we're going to go ahead and start going through. If our if statement is equal to 0, so we have up here, then we're going to print 1. And then our else statement, we want to make sure that we go through our while loop, that while it's greater than 1, n minus 1, and then we're going to keep using we're going to turn into answer, having a second n. That's what we're going to have down here. Our answer is going to be concatenated into a string so we can access the element, and then we're going to print out the last element. So if it's 24, we access 4, or if it's 240, we access 0. And that's pretty much the end of this video.